Africa is potentially an enormous producer of energy, of every kind of energy, green energy, hydrogen, geothermic, they've got gas, they've got everything.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching me from. One of the European leaders that I respect so much is the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni. Giorgia Meloni is the Prime Minister of Italy. She understands the problems which Africans are passing through. And this same problem is also affecting our country, which is Italy. Because ever since she assumed office, she has been fighting illegal migration as a result of the bad governance that is happening in Africa. And she also knew that Africa is not a poor continent, because Africa has enormous amount of natural resources. All the resources that the West need, they are all deposited in Africa, but yet Africa is poor and poor, one of the poorest in the continent. Giorgia Meloni understands the pains which Africans are passing through. That is why she always have issues with the Prime Minister of France, Emmanuel Macron. Several occasions she have addressed the President of France to allow Africa to have their natural resources so that they can develop in their own pace. Because it's as a result of that development that is not in Africa that is making Africans to migrate here in Europe. These people understand that Africa is a very rich continent, but they are bringing Africans down to our knees. They are sucking Africans down, thereby taking away our natural resources for penny. My fellow Africans, if you do not know what you have, know it now, that Africa is the future. If you do not believe in Africa, I want you all to start from now to start believing in Africa, because Africa is the future. Africa is the key. Africa owns the world, because all that the world needs to function is located in Africa. But these people make you think that you are valueless as a result of the leaders which we have in Africa. Despite our natural resources that have been taken away from the continent of Africa to various parts of the world, and the money which was also generated in Africa, they enable the politicians to launder that money to various countries here in Europe and America and Asia. Africa, we need to take that which belongs to us. The Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, is a woman that understands the potentials of Africa. But a lot of migrants do not like her because of the way she is sounding. But if you really look down, you will understand that this Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, is fighting for the interests of Africa. Because if France allow Africans to benefit from their resources, Africans will not migrate to Europe. She knows this. That is why she has always called on the Emmanuel Macron to allow Africans to be, so that Africans can develop in their own pace. I just want you to watch this little interview of this woman who understands what is going on in foreign policies that the Europe.
You had a meeting in Washington with President Biden and the Congress. How did your meeting with President Biden go? How would you describe it?
Well, it was very open, long. We discussed a lot about few topics in a in a moment in which everything around us seems to change. So there are many things about our bilateral relations, but also in the global crisis that we're facing that we had to discuss. So it was a very good discussion, and I was very, very happy.
We had President Trump on this program. He said that the U.S. has sent $100 billion to Ukraine, and Europe has only sent $20 billion. So I ask you, what is the right number, and what do you expect from Italy in the future with regard to Ukraine and ending this war?
First of all, well, Italy has done a lot. Europe is where we are paying more for this war. That means inflation, that means energy bills, energy prices, that means raw material prices. In my first budget law, I had to put 30 billions on the energy bills. So we are really affected by the consequences of the war. And it has to be, taken in account.
Next year, Italy will take the leadership in the G7. What are you expecting? What do you want to see from the other members?
Well, there is a work that we began in the G7 in Japan that, in my opinion, is very important, about supply chains, about the mistakes that we did about globalization. I mean, we thought that free commerce without rules could solve our problems, could distribute richness, and could democratize systems that were less democratic than ours. Didn't happen. And the second thing that happened was that systems that were not democratic involved on the institutional side and gained space in the world. Now they are stronger, and we are more weak, for we don't control our supply chains. So what we have to do is rethink these times, understand that on strategic things, we cannot leave things go. And where, in my opinion, we weren't enough concentrated was Africa. I say it for I'm the direct neighbor, but first of all, Africa is not a poor continent. It's not. It is a continent that has many, many resources. Moreover, rare earth, metals, raw materials, 50% of arable lands. We're not taking care of that. And Africa today is victim of many external spoilers that work against its stability. It is something that can be used against us.
And with regard to Africa, the issue of China comes up.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you about that. Is China dominating or trying to dominate the continent and scooping up some of those raw materials and metals that you mentioned that are so critical to technology?
Absolutely, China has an important presence at the time in Africa. And, I think it's normal that everyone tries to defend its national interests. The problem is if we are able to do that. I mean, what I don't really agree with is the approach that sometimes the West world had with these countries. For the idea I have is that we are always ready to give advices, but not so ready to give a hand. They don't trust us a lot. And I cannot say that they are completely wrong. That's why my opinion is that we have to change this approach. What I want to do is to bring investments in Africa. Bring investments not only to say we want to help. No, that's not geopolitics. If you want to do serious things, you have to do things that are useful for both. For example, now we have a problem in Europe about energy sources after the war, but Africa is potentially an enormous producer of energy, of every kind of energy, green energy, hydrogen, geothermic, they've got gas, they've got everything. So if we help them taking out and producing this energy, and we tie them with Europe, we will solve many problems together.
Let me ask you about immigration, because you have talked about 1,000 illegal immigrants coming in every day. Are they coming from Northern Africa? How are you dealing with this?
They are coming at the time, moreover, from Tunisia and from Libya. There are two difficult situations. Libya, we know. Tunisia is a nation that is risking financial default. There was a deal open with the IMF that was not so easy to close, also for the approach of the two interlocutors. But we've been beginning dealing with the president of Tunisia and some others. They come from Asia, for example, passing by Africa to come illegally to Italy. It's not something that we can manage only on the security side, but we have to fight the traffickers. What the traffickers are doing is incredible. I mean, this organization, they are becoming always more powerful. And they use their power and the money they do also against the state. We cannot allow mafia to decide who's coming to our countries.
Italy has been an early adopter of the China Belt and Road before your term, of course. There are new questions now on whether or not you will renew this next year. Have you made a decision?
Not yet. It is something that has to be discussed in Italy with the parliament and with the actors. The paradox with the Belt and Road Initiative is that we are the only nation in the G7 and the European Union, but we are not the nation that has the best trade with China. That means you can have good relations with China without the Belt and Road Initiative, but it's something, in my opinion, has to be discussed with Chinese government and, inside of the Italian parliament. But anyway, we will take a decision before December.
Well, it's interesting because we're dealing with this national security issue in America. Do you believe that the CCP is also spying on Italy?
I think that with China, we need to have deals. I mean, the fact is that we have to understand there is a system that is quite different from ours. With the role that enterprises have is not the same that they have in a system like ours. I mean, our enterprises don't have to pass the data to the government if the government asks. And that is what makes the difference. And then regard to China, I think the problem is how we come back to the discussion we were doing about globalization, is how we can manage a world in which we understood finally that commerce can be free only if it is also fair. For instead, there is a great problem for those who have rules and targets that are quite high, thanking God. I mean, with workers, with environmental rules, we ask a lot to our enterprises to respect our civilization. But then we have to consider when we trade with somebody who doesn't follow the same rules and doesn't have the same standards. We are instead creating great problems to our economy.
Is there a conservative movement taking place throughout Europe? We see obviously what has taken place in Italy. We see the performance of the UK. That may be a problem for the Tories. You've got Greece's leadership winning a second term. So do you think socialism is failing in Europe, and are voters now moving toward a conservative approach?
I think that the shocks that we had in the last years, the pandemic crisis before, the war in Ukraine after, created some problems, many problems, and opened the eyes of many citizens about the fact that there is a fundamental difference between the conservatives and the leftists. They want a world that isn't the world they live in, but it doesn't, they don't mind. That is what happens in Europe, in my opinion. So they made lots of mistakes, trying to follow their ideological approach. I think citizens now, they understand this difference, and in tough moments, they want to be governed by somebody who doesn't follow ideological utopics.
So what do you want to say to critics of your policies, of you during the campaign? Because Italy is doing well. The economy avoided recession. Your policies are resonating. And yet in the New York Times this weekend, what's happening in Italy is scary and it's spreading. Your reaction?
There is nothing I want to tell to those who criticize me. I think it is a right they have. The only way I like to respond is with results. So I act, I do what I think is right for my nation, for the interests of my nations, and I think that what is happening in Italy is the only thing that really can give an answer on that. So we're growing more than the other great European economies. We've got the highest rates ever about occupation, about stable occupation, about women occupation. Things are going well. I see also in the Italian economy that people now believe that things can change, that things can go better, so they do more. And that's what, in my opinion, can make the difference. I mean, the first thing I said to Italian companies, for example, was, we will not disturb you. We want you to believe that we can go better, we can do better, and you won't have a state creating problems to you and trying to kick you for you want to create job or you want to create richness. You will have a state, you will have institutions able to work with you, near you. That doesn't mean that we don't have rules. We have it, and we are quite strict on it, but we want them to believe there's nothing the institutions can do if people do not answer. So we have to go all in the same direction. We have to do it together. And that was my first message. And I think that many of them understood it. And that is why, in my opinion, things are going quite well. Well, despite the situation that is not easy, that we have to manage every day. In this particular moments, emergency is the only certainty that you have got. So not easy to manage, but they know I think they know I'm doing my best, and they want to do their best too.